Well, let's first talk about, like, how much time do you have, Peter?
Well, I've got to be in Pyro by 4 o'clock, which means that I have to leave here at 3:30.
Oh, that's plenty of time.
And
Oh,
then there is a little broadcast, not broadcast, but group online session with two biodynamic people talking, one of whom you've met, explaining the benefits of biodynamics as far as they see it.
oh,
And that
yeah,
begins at 12 o'clock and goes till 1 o'clock.
okay.
Mr. Longworth is one of them. And
Oh, Mark Longworth.
yeah, Mark Longworth.
Okay.
And Christine Morini is the other person.
Okay.
Glenn's quite supportive of one, but not quite so supportive of the other.
Okay.
So I've just been having a little flick through this, and I see there possibly two options. One is to write an entirely new book, and the other is to edit and update this one. And the other one could be dedicated to climate resilient, something that catches the imagination of a lot of people, the climate resilient farm.
Yeah, and a lot of them struggle. A lot of them struggle, and gardeners, with the climate change, with drought,
Yeah.
and too wet.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
Well, when you kill the soil has no carbon cushion, can't hold water.
Yeah.
And a lot of these chemicals were left over from particularly the Second World War, but some from the First World War. And the producers felt they were onto a good thing, and they had to keep their market going. So agriculture copped it. And once you start using Justus von Liebig's original theorems over a long period of time, the fertilizers and the fertilizer theorem kills the soil, because the soil is dependent on water-soluble availability, which was once the thought that all plants absorbed their nutrition through the ends of the roots,
Yeah.
were osmotic suckers. They didn't understand about the finer biology that you need a good strong microscope to see. And Elaine Ingham, for example, said that she'd counted up to 25,000 different soil organisms and was still going strong, but felt it was time to do something else. And so she stopped. And her husband studied just one of those organisms, and his whole doctoral scientific life was spent just studying one variety of organism in their different forms and what they could do. So there's an awful lot about the soil that wasn't understood when Justus von Liebig set his theorems. And so things need to change, and one of the first changes that I am aware of is with the work of Dr. William Albrecht,
Yeah.
who predicated that health be the number one target, health and well-being of the land. So he approached things in quite a different way. from the fertilizer aspect, or understanding how to balance soils with the elements that plants needed. He arrived, of course, at a time when considerable damage had been done by the water solubility theory. It certainly kicks things off very quickly when it's first applied to virgin land, but after a time it has its day, and things need to be changed. And there were others after William Albrecht who improved even on what he had to say, but my personal experience is that if you bring soils up to the optimum of Dr. William Albrecht's theorem, they really do perform. And you don't need to apply extra nitrogen, that you can use some. It opens the door so that the plants can get all they want from the nitrogen in the air, which makes up 79% of the atmosphere. And so selling farmers nitrogen is like selling fridges to Eskimos and or people that live in very cold climates. So that's one of the things that is important. During the Second World War, nitrogen in the form of urea was used to make runways in England, that they would take a suitably placed and flat field from a farmer, take it under the state regulations, and they would put urea on at the same rate they would otherwise put lime on, and in a very short time the paddock or the ground became harder than a road and more water repellent, became hydrophobic. So the land became very serviceable for landing aircraft on, but landing aircraft is not the general purpose of agricultural land.
Yeah.
It's not made to, it's not a desired quality to be able to carry heavy wheel traffic. What we need is a living, breathing, life-filled substrate there that is able to breathe in air, breathe in moisture, and grow the organisms
like our
that
tissue.
help the plant to find what it needs in its environment. And mycorrhizal fungi are the chief transporters of such nutrition. It is important that the plant be happy in its environment, and different plants require slightly different circumstances. When the plant is really happy in its environment, it photosynthesizes well. It makes, and the process of photosynthesis produces sugar in the plant. In a healthy circumstance, 30% or more of the sugars made each day go down into the soil, and 41% of that sugar is carbon. And so the root-feeding organisms, bacteria and fungi and others, consume that, and once they are fed and thriving, they are the food source for the second tier, and they the third tier. So everybody is somebody else's dinner in a healthy soil life. And if you feed, as I have done on farms, feed that system well and see that the plants photosynthesize to their absolute optimum, that it is possible to make a layer of new worm casts over pasture land that is at least 2 centimetres deep in 90 days after the biology kicks in again with sufficient moisture after a dry period. On that particular farm, that circumstance maintained for 180 days.
Yeah.
People also extol the virtues of having a worm farm and putting worm castings back on the land. Just imagine the labour and the energy and the time involved in putting between 2 to 4 centimetres of worm casting over 100 acres, for example, which is a small part of one farm in pasture. It would be absolutely considerable.
Some trucks.
Yeah, because at 2 centimetres, that's something like about 20 square metres per cubic metre.
Yeah.
At 4 centimetres, it's 10.
Yeah.
10 square metres per cubic metre. And so that is a mammoth task. Done the right way,
Yeah.
the worms will do it all for you. Nature will provide. But you must help to provide for nature. So you are the governor, the director, the sense of self, the identity of a farm. You know, we often say, well, this is Fred's place, this is Bill's place, and each place varies according to the nature and the being of the farmer who looks after it. And so this is where it's important for the farmer to be reasonably well educated on how the values can be given to the farmland and what actions he needs to take. In New Zealand currently, many farms are farmed by the farm consultant, and the farmer just carries out the instructions and milks the cows or does the stock work. Good farming really is not so complex, but it is a lot more complex than bad farming. In other words, trying to take a shortcut by using chemical fertilizers and chemical adjuncts to kill things, whether they be bacteria, fungi, worms or lice or anything else. All those organisms that we refer to as pests are really messengers. And there is the old saying, don't shoot the messenger. So, and I say, at least read the message first before you shoot it. And if you understand those organisms, you will then understand the message that they're bringing.
Yeah.
What is not right and what you've got to put right for those messengers to not need to send you a message. Stopping the postal service is not the way to avoid getting the letter you don't want.
Yeah.
You need to avert the need for that letter. That I see as one of the important aspects, and understanding the mineral balance, the requirements of the soil, the drainage, the aeration requirements, the acidity, alkalinity, All those make up the requirements for a healthy plant. And Steiner in 1924 spoke to a group of farmers about spiritual renewal of agriculture and gave a whole basic recipe which has since been worked on by various people, and while it hasn't been commonplace yet, this whole concept that initially sounds very difficult has been much more simple and accessible to whatever scale of farming that people need to undertake, whatever their heart's desire is. So in the extreme case, I was called into a farm that had a toxicity issue. Cows were very uncomfortable not milking. The bank manager was becoming agitated and thought that he was going to be put in charge of selling the farm up, because rural bank managers have other bank managers over them who don't give a damn about the farmer. They give a very strong damn about the money. And if the money stops flowing and stops coming, then it's time to install a new farmer on the land. And so by going in there and using one element that counterbalanced the problem, or perhaps as a salt it's two elements, plus all the biodynamic preparations and their proper order and timing, transformed the fortunes of this farmer to enable him to pay off the errant debt or excessive debt in 6 short weeks. That's 1.5 paychecks. And
if he has a dairy farm.
That was on a dairy farm.
Yeah.
And so biodynamic treatments, because that's what we used in a form that was accessible to this particular farmer, can be very, very sudden and beneficial if properly applied. But we need to believe in what we're doing, because in Mr. Emoto's view, our mindset has quite a strong part of the outcome. And if we don't believe in what we're doing, if we are not convinced about what we're doing, then largely we are the author of our own misfortune or good fortune.
Yes,
it's the other way around.
So we can decide if we go for our own feeling or intuition, or working after several principles in this understanding of biodynamic, or do we follow an order?
You have to inform yourself or believe strongly the person who is informing you, and follow it. If it's given as a recipe, follow it exactly until such time as you're able to make your own recipe.
Right.
By understanding the issues that the messengers of the environment are giving you, to enable you to bring balance and harmony and happiness back to every organism that lives within the boundaries of your farm, including yourself.
So you need to build up trust to the consultant in this case.
If you do not know it yourself, ask somebody who does. Some of this is written in books, and you can work it out for yourself if it's not an urgent matter. But if it is an urgent matter, seek the person who can give you the help. Until such time as through helping, he can also educate you to be master of your own destiny fully. That's my advice to people. Farmers and gardeners and growers don't owe me a living, but if I can help, I'm more than happy. But my first consideration is that they become profitable.
Yeah.
And like a tyre on a car or any other fast-moving wheel, if it's perfectly in balance, it runs at any speed without any wobble or discomfort. And so that also applies to our agricultural system. When it is fully in balance, it will perform without undue effort being put in by others. It should become, as I've described in my first book, the farmer who got things right at the base and said that farming is a breeze. He has a very small herd by modern standards and is very profitable. He particularly likes the drought seasons because he's got lots of trees on his farm. He likes the drought seasons because that's when everything does the best and his cows produce more. I could give him ways of helping to produce on the wetter years, but he's convinced that his low input to virtually nil input system works perfectly well. So he is the lord and master of his land, so be it. You can only offer to help. If your help is not needed, then that's fine. You wait for the next person to ask.
Yeah.
And, so a lot of effort and money and whatever is being applied to climate issues today. The common thing is to blame carbon. Carbon in the air is carbon dioxide. It is claimed that it is very unhelpful to the well-being of humanity in that it's making the world hotter and that it's making droughts more common and severe, and that when the rain comes, it comes in large dollops and the soil can't hold it, and so we get floods and torrents and damage to people's homes and deaths and drownings and etc. In my opinion, the carbon in the atmosphere is not the problem. There are other toxic elements that get injected into the air by our modern life, but carbon is not the problem. Carbon doesn't hold the warmth back to the degree that it's blamed for. The carbon is important in one issue, and that it should be part of the plant and part of the soil. In a plant, it is commonly in short-lived plants, it is commonly around about 4%, or if the plant is dried, ready for the laboratory, about 40%. Oxygen, the other part of carbon dioxide, can be in a dried plant up to 45%, but in a pasture plant, dried, ready for the lab. In a growing plant, the oxygen is much higher because it's an important part, the majority part of water, and the major difference between a dried plant and a growing plant is water. Plants to grow need to transpire. So where we really need the carbon is in the soil. To get it there, as I've just recently described, is through photosynthesis in plants. It's something that if you set it up right, it happens without you sweating anymore. It happens of itself. You just need to guide and see that the right things are done at the right time, as I have just previously described. So by good biological farming, growing plants that are absolutely optimum in their photosynthesis, you have a system that creates what one might call the carbon sponge in the earth. But this carbon sponge shouldn't just be carbon. It should be the home of many, many, many different biological forms and systems that make a living mass under the soil. So the mass of livestock under the soil surface should be at least equal to the mass above the soil in a pastured farm. Obviously in a cropping farm there's not much more than the farmer there occasionally.
So some people came up with the idea to bury wood in the soil to get carbon in. What do you think about this idea? Whether in charcoal or whole trunks or residues or whatever.
The wood should not be wasted. If it's not burnt as a fuel, if it's not used as farm timber or posts or rails, stays, etc., then it can either be chipped and used as a chipping for padding under barn-held animals. The old days, a couple of hundred years ago, charcoal was made in the forest. Charcoal can be finely ground and applied. It can be one form of what's known as humates. The other form of humates, it comes from young coal, the coal that's been quite recently formed. And that can go back because it's the carbon in conjunction with calcium that helps your soil to flocculate and breathe. And this is part of developing a living soil. So certainly not to waste, but it's not as important as having that photosynthesis working.
Yeah.
And of course with hedges and trees, the roots are depositing their carbon at a lower level than what we can commonly get to, even by taking samples to 1 meter, you need special equipment.
So, also some people say, if I want to interrupt you shortly, this charcoal is in pH high. The pH of the charcoal is high.
Right.
And you can't add lime to it because lime has also a high pH. It doesn't make sense.
They won't combine as a salt.
Yeah.
No, well...
you talked about the lime,
yeah.
function of the lime.
Okay. To talk about acidity and alkalinity, which for some say that's incidental rather than prime, it's a measure of acidity and alkalinity. If we start with the cow's paunch or even human, the acidity in human digestion, what we take in, at least in the paunch of grazing animals, the pH in the rumen, the first place that the food goes to, the food basket after harvesting, is an anaerobic digester that should be running at a pH of 6.4 to 6.6. Now, if the fodder that goes in there is approximately that sort of acidity, very, very slightly acid, almost neutral, and it helps that digestive process and reduces the amount of energy that the animal has to apply to make that right.
Yeah.
So that making the optimum use of the nutrition that she's taken on board. To get that sort of acidity, alkalinity balance in the plant, the soil doesn't need to be too far different. So what I'm looking for is if all the other things are in balance for a particular soil, your parts hydrogen or acidity measure should be between 6.2 and 6.8, within that sort of range. At 6.8, it enables you then to use a little bit of sulfur to just kick things along, or some other acid that the soil may be deemed to need, quite quickly, just to give things a kick along if it is deemed necessary. But generally speaking, at over 6.2, the white clover plant, for example, produces much more nitrogen. In other words, the bacteria that forms in the nodules are much more active, and so much more nitrogen is able to be transferred by that particular process. It's not the only process, because every organism in the soil has a protein quotient to it, varying according to the various species. The protein levels can be a little different. The protein in those organisms is almost always made up of amino acids, and because starting again at the animal, either ammonia or a nitrate is toxic to that animal, and has to be withstood or overcome.
What is toxic? There was just a cow going by.
Oh, that the elements of nitrate and ammonia are toxic to the animal, and so they have to be overcome by the animal in the part of digestion. Part of digestion.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that there is at no point any nitrate or ammonia surplus floating about or available in any part of the biological system. That the soil has a system for taking the nitrogen out of the air and taking it through to nitrous oxide, to nitrite, to nitrate, or it stores it usually in a slightly acid soil. It's stored as in the ammonia form or urea form, and then as needed is oxidized to nitrate. And it's usually taken up by the plant as that, but not always.
A lot of farms, also garden, has to start with a pH of 5.5, and there are a lot of imbalances in the system. where would you start on this
Okay,
place?
the first point to start is to get a reliable assay of the soil, both in the first top 200 or wherever the roots are developing to, the majority of them, and to have a sample that goes to approximately a metre, maybe a bit more. This may not be so easy to obtain in many soils, but if you can get down to that, and that gives you some idea of the reserves, what plants can burrow for, because the mycorrhizal fungi on the plant goes far beyond the space of the root in search of what the plant needs.
They bring these elements to the plant?
Yes. The bacteria at the other end work on digest on that mineral and make it available for the mycorrhizal fungi to take back to the plant. And the plant, by the issue of the type of sugar, sends the message to the mycorrhizal fungi, the waiter, please bring me XYZ, and this amount and that amount and at this time and that time. And so this biological system is the equivalent of a human going into the luxury restaurant with a very wide selection menu, as opposed to the soup kitchen where there's either soup for the thirsty or soup for the hungry. It's all the same, and that's what we're doing with our chemical farming. It's soup, madam, soup, sir. Whether you're hungry or thirsty, it's soup, and all the same recipe, depending on what's available to add to the water to make it soup.
And now, some expect adding, we have talked about 2 days ago with some guys, adding charcoal to such an acidic soil as they hope to transform something, even if the charcoal is loaded up with some microbial life. They hope to convert this land in a fertile land and lift the pH.
Yeah,
Does it work that way?
The important thing is to make a home for the biology, and that carbon does. It's very porous. It's very light. On the periodic atomic weight scale, it's 8, as say composed to oxygen at 16. Oxygen is the prime part of water, so water must be very close to 16.
So
periodic table.
Carbon sinks down and oxygen floats or goes into the air from its nature.
Carbon dioxide also effervesces out of the soil, and that's why it's important to have plenty of leaf cover over to take that carbon back again. It's important to have a low wind run. It does need some wind run, but not a high wind run over the soil, so that the carbon dioxide that comes back out of a healthy soil is not blown away. That it can be recycled and go back again to help the plant make sugar. That's an important part of the whole process. So my father always told me the most important aspect of any shelter belt was to stop the wind from blowing the carbon dioxide away. We also, on farms where animals exist, we have carbon dioxide from the breathing process. Otherwise, it's the farmer and his machinery. And it's an important, in any system, not to have undue leaks. And this is one of them. Some people are really concerned about birds, so you change the variety of trees to match and give you the number and the variety of birds that you want, because every bird has its preferred nesting place, its preferred breeding place. Nature's organisms develop and prosper according to the food source and comfort and water availability for them. And if any of those are lacking, then they don't prosper. So if the birds that eat your fruit are a problem, then don't plant the shelter that they love to breed in. Plant another type of shelter.
Yeah. Or for the predator.
But it is important, yes, or see that they're balanced by the right number of tomcats.
Yeah.
Or whatever else. Hawks, and there's many predators that keep things in balance.
Yeah.
And it's the farmer's business to create that balance in the first place, with an understanding, loving, caring attitude. Because as we were talking about Professor Emoto from Japan previously, and about the attitude, it's the attitude refers to the lake, it refers to your land, it refers to your plants and the cooking, and the way it is laid on the table, and the gratitude with which it is eaten. That's all an important part of the whole process, and that is something that we need to learn to govern. It is important for the development and the well-being of humanity. One could write another book or two on the value of the earth for all human development, but well, let's stick to the agricultural bit.
Yeah. Perhaps not everyone is interested in. There are also a lot of soils with high alkalinity, and what would
what
you
need to look for there is what is causing the alkalinity.
Yeah.
What within the acid range, what is lacking, and that is over and above seeing that it's properly drained and not over drained.
Yeah. Because more likely a swamp goes into alkalinity, or how you said
well, you've got your acid elements of principally phosphorus and sulfur to work with on the larger scale, and just to see that they are in the right relationship to everything else. That the whole thing with the soils is relationships, and relationships relate to what it is you want to grow. There are some plants that grow well with the alkalinity. Are they the ones that you wish to produce? Is there a market for that particular produce? Rather than go to a whole lot of trouble changing something to grow something
that suits to the soil, or
to meet another market. So one needs to look at this right from the absolute basic. Why would I want to change it? Is it not growing anything that I can market? Do I have no sympathy at all with what it grows naturally?
Yeah.
These are all questions and then you need to look through a soil assay, soil test, at what the balance of elements are and what the prospects are for changing it. And then of course you've got to go back to how much humus is there, how much carbon is there, because that in the end is going to be that cushion anchor that is able to hold this change in place. And so it's not so much that it's too alkaline, is what nutrient is missing that it needs to be brought in to create the balance. And you need
This is a
good
normal
and
thinking, way of
complex,
thinking. Yeah.
soil test to sort that very often.
Yeah.
And of course, once one person has got it, then it sort of becomes historical or general information if you're prepared to share it. You know, that good farmers can be sharing, caring people. You generally speaking, no need to hustle and compete with one another. With the number of people on the planet at the moment, there should be plenty of opportunity to market.
Yeah.
Particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, in America and Europe and Asia, all highly populated areas.
And they say we are running out of food, so we...
Well, that could be a subject for another.
Yeah, it's another book.
Then you come into the whole means of distribution,
Yeah.
and you come into the money system and the capacity to share prosperity. There again comes in an attitude of humanity. Many of us, through being told there's a scarcity, become greedy. The few of us become greedy without the scarcity. Even in a land of plenty, they're still greedy and want to dominate and tell everybody else what to do. Some people have the opinion that the world is overpopulated and needs to be depopulated. I say to them, good. If that's what you believe, lead by
Then
example.
go for it.
Lead by example.
Yeah.
When all the people who have that opinion have left, then the balance should be just right.
Yeah. My recipe for overpopulation.
It's quite simple.
Yeah.
And then those who are able to help with a healthy biological system and a healthy means of distribution of food, there should be food aplenty for everyone.
Yeah.
But part of this is the growth of the human being himself, herself, itself. To be benign, to be helpful, to have a big enough sense of self to be able to share, to be able to be unhappy if they see somebody in a miserable state. They should be miserable also until they've made that person happy. And therein, I think, lies a target for some, a distant target, that we have to aspire to. And that, I think, fits into part of what we're trying to work through, that this principal aim of this sort of thing is helping people to grow, helping people to mature, because our eventual state is not to remain forever human or become partly mechanical. It is to become the loving, caring beings that no longer need earth bodies, called angels. Over time, we have to move in that direction. The Christ spent 3 years on the earth setting an example of how we should work
Achieve
towards
this.
that goal. And if we took those basic elements of learning on board, then uh, the main defense mechanism for any territory should be being good neighbors. If you're a good neighbor, then all good neighbors then have no need to possess another man's property, another person's, and I mean man as a human being, another person's property. That you can all live in harmony. So that is the target, but somehow there's always some who stir the pot and incite one person to fight another, even if it's a little tailor who's sent out to sort out the two giants. Throw a pebble at one and a pebble at the other until they start a fight, and then you go home and say, I've killed them. So,
And you're happy.
but
Yeah.
that's something that we need to overcome, and I see part of good nutrition, which requires good agriculture, which requires a happy climate that is able to absorb what the weather systems throw at it, all this is part of human well-being, and we perform a lot better, even over a relatively short time. I've seen dramatic changes, well, certainly in animal behaviour, basically overnight, with changing the quality of the food or fodder, and so it can be largely with human beings too, only it usually takes a little longer. So whether it's physical ailments that require a doctor's attention, or the mental ailments that require a psychologist's attention, by having a good, nutritious, well-balanced food, a lot of them can find other employment.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the climate resilient farm. That's kind of where you started, and then we came to the common myth about carbon, and you talked a little bit about that.
Right. So carbon needs to be got into the soil, and I think where we had a divergence is when we started talking about wood.
Yeah, wood and alkalinity and like that, right?
Yeah,
but
important.
Let's go back to.
It's important for me because there are a lot of misunderstandings in this.
Just looking at the flow of the book, we can talk about those like niche issues later, but now let's look at the carbon. And you were saying that needs to go back into the soil.
The important place for carbon is in the soil as a living substrate called humus. That this gives the carbon has the capacity to hold 4 times its weight in water, given that a cubic meter of carbon or a cubic centimeter of cubic millimeter of carbon is approximately half the weight of water, and water is the standard balance for weights and measures, well, weights anyway. A ton is 1 cubic meter, and a pound is a different amount. A litre is 1 kilogram. By volume, carbon to water is 2 to 1. By weight, it's 4 to 1. Humus, when it is this living substrate called humus, the ratio is 1 to 1. And there's approximately 25% carbon in humus. And humus has the capacity to hold nearly every other earthbound element that a plant might require. So to go back to what you were saying about carbon, there's part of carbon's value is holding those other elements
Yeah.
available for a plant to take as and when needed. So that is also part, a part of the climate resilience. The total resilience of a farm is to have readily available and held in the right form. So then we got on to the trees and the shrubs and moderating the wind flow above to see that the carbon stays where it is most needed in the realm of the plants to make new sugar and to go round the cycle again. It's the ultimate of recycling. And there needs to be air movement. You can't lock it up tight, but to have that rapid air movement that really scours the carbon dioxide out, and that needs to be that is a large part of what the trees and shrubs are about. The other part is broadening the spectrum of oils, essential oils, omega oils, protein forms, different amino acids, and
No.
somebody
Somebody else. I thought it was perhaps a mobile phone of yours.
Right. Well, my mobile phone's in my pocket. Jill's should be with her.
Yeah, okay.
Yours shouldn't be too far away.
Yeah.
And
So we need to look at broadening the spectrum of essential oils, protein forms, different amino acids.
Yeah, and different vitamins and all the different ingredients that can be put together as meaning good nutrition. Living good, strong, living, balanced nutrition that is dense in nutrients and low in empty calories. So that is the other important aspect of trees and shrubs on a farm. Comes second after the primary of photosynthesis and air management. Then we got diverted onto birds, that having these things might make the home for birds that are unhelpful in the production. Then my suggestion was that you modify the trees and shrubs that you have in variety to give you the right populations, because all the different birds have their favorite nesting places, and that is something that you can legitimately manage.
Yeah.
So long as you don't manage to eliminate.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we're about. Is manage to get a harmonious relationship between all things that belong. We have behind all these insects and birds and other forms, we have the elemental beings, and they are largely forgotten, but very important part of this whole game as well. But in the management of carbon, you have also the management of airflow, and then there's the management of species that live within what we're going to use to manage the airflow. So everything's connected to everything else, and these are consequences that arise from actions that need to be thought through as part of the basic farm plan. So while in one aspect it should be very simple, there are contingencies and understandings that have to be taken that may seem at first to be rather complex. But if you're going to have harmony, then every species on the earth has to be considered.
Did you heard about March?
Let him just continue with the thoughts. Got it for now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, he's thought of a certain concept.
So this air management is part of climate resilience. Now the next thing with shrubs and trees is that they transpire per acre, per hectare, per square quadrat metre, whichever way you want to measure it. They transpire much more than the annual plants do. Every living plant transpires, but some transpire more than others. So it's like communism. They're all equal, but some are more equal than others. And there's somebody who thinks he's more equal than others. Good morning, how are you?
Very well. Do you know my name?
No, I don't.
Sometimes telephones tell you the name. Now, it's Jill McLeod. I had a massage last month.
Oh, yes, Jill. How are you?
I'd like another one next Monday, please.
Certainly. I think there's one other person asked, so that's sort of between 10 and 11.
Yeah. So 11ish.
11ish, yeah.
Good. That'll be grand. Thank you.
Maybe.
It's a big difference to all kinds of things.
Good.
But I can still tell you a few things that haven't made a difference to.
Okay, well, there's something still to work on.
Yes.
Yes, well,
That'll be great.
we'll see if we can work our way through it.
Hopefully, yes. Good.
Yeah, if it suits, you can be there a little bit before 11.
Yes, I shall be there before 11.
Very good. Well,
Thanks, Peter.
you're welcome. Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Second person for the Monday massage. Another one I need to work on. This is Wayne Douglas from up north who wants to come and stay for a couple of days.
Oh, that was the thing about the party, yeah.
And I said to just wait until all the family and other visitors are sorted. Yeah.
Okay, we were talking about, well, we'll make some lunch.
Yeah, we need to go out and harvest something from the garden as well.
Okay.
And then with the dandelion flowers for preparation.
Okay.
Done most of the...
Oh, we can harvest. Oh, Bernhard is eating something. We'll harvest.
Let's make some lunch.
Some things from the garden, and then we'll make some lunch.
Yeah.
We were just talking about trees and shrubs that they transpire.
Yeah. So transpiration is an important part of the water cycle. The transpiration from plants is considered to be the secondary water cycle, the primary one being the evaporation from the sea. Trees and shrubs also release bacteria with the transpiration, and the bacteria can be part of the seeding process for the cloud to come back down again, so it doesn't get stuck up there, as some clouds do in certain circumstances. And so some of the bigger trees in a hot summer's day can transpire in excess of 20 tons of water a day. You can imagine the evaporative cooling aspect that this may exert, and that's just one tree. One could have several hundred trees on a hectare of land and still grow pasture as much as if there were no trees, or perhaps even more. You get then some vertical grazing as well as the horizontal or lateral grazing of just grazing pasture. Many farmers are of the belief that it's only pasture, and some even believe there's only one species of grass plant, namely ryegrass, is what's suitable for productive animals. If you ask the animal and let them into a space where they have a broad selection, as in a garden, the shrubs and trees attract their attention first. In Old England, even with the 40+ species pastures, it was the hedgerows that attracted a cow's attention first. So cows and sheep, to a large extent, are browsers, not just grazers. So that's another important part of this grazing resilience, that you have to reach a little further.
Thank you.
The grazing, so they are an important part of a cow's or domestic animal's diet. Horses tend to be a little bit developed a little bit more to eat the trees and shrubs, and even the lignin of some of the branches. The donkeys even more so, and so every animal is adjusted for eating what it most needs. And so trees and shrubs are an important part of an animal's fodder. If you're a grazier, if you're a dairy farmer, if you're a sheep farmer, then there's different aspects, different groups of plants that need to be considered, both for your locality and the type of animal that you want to look after. It's time to make some lunch.
Yeah, crazy with the noise of today.
Yeah.
That broadcast.